We're EarthForce. We are a national nonprofit and the home of environmental action civics. In field chats, you'll hear research-based, actionable tips and inspiring stories of youth-adult partnerships that empower young people to become environmental decision makers. Thanks for tuning in. Let's get started.
Hello and welcome to Field Chats, Environmental Action Civics Essentials, brought to you by EarthForce. My name is SJ and I am one of the program managers at EarthForce. I'm joined here by Kristen, Taylor, and Vince. And in the background, we have our communications person, Haley. We're really excited. Our special guest is Vince Meldrum today, our CEO. So, hi, y'all. How are you doing? Doing okay?
Doing good.
Doing good.
Fantastic.
Right. Good to be here with you. Today, we are going to be continuing to explore the alignment of environmental action civics with civics, specifically civic education. So we'll be discussing how environmental action civics, or EAC, is the next evolution of civics, and it is one that prepares students to participate, not just memorize the facts. So we're going to just open up here with a personal share, wondering what is y'all's relationship with civic education as a young person growing up?
I don't mind starting because mine's very brief. Yeah, I had one civics class. It was called Civics, and we learned about, the traditional civic stuff, 3 branches of government, etc. And that was that. Kristen, tell us about your experience.
I had a rather interesting civics education. So I'm from a very small town. And like you, Taylor, I also had just one civics/government class in high school. But it was taught by a member of our community who she herself was not from the United States and was teaching the United States government class, which I found was a very cool experience. Shout out, Mrs. Grates. Thank you. And because I'm from a pretty small town, a lot of those local government, kind of local civic actions were very close to home. So yeah, I felt that the kind of not so formal aspects of that were pretty ingrained in my youth.
That's interesting. I didn't have a civics class in high school. We had the option when I was in high school of taking something called recreation. And so my last 2 years of high school were skiing and mountain biking and stuff like that. And so I got credit for all of those things, which explains my college success when I originally went to college. But my civic experience during that time period was when I was in middle school. And I did have a civics class then, but I volunteered with my mom, and this will, I think, shock you guys, on the Re-elect Nixon campaign. So we were going door to door for Re-elect Nixon. And that was the key civic experience for me.
Wow, that's awesome, Vince.
Who was facilitating that?
We volunteered with the Republican Party. My mom was a member, and we were just regular volunteers.
Yeah, that's great.
What about you, SJ?
Yeah, I'm definitely more in line with Taylor's experience. It was one of those classes I don't remember well, which indicates it wasn't engaging, right? And a lot of memorizing facts. I was not felt like a participating citizen in it or after it. We all are here, though. We had some maybe positive or not positive experience that brought us to work in the environmental action civics field. And I'm grateful we're here and we bring diverse experiences. So before we jump in, I'm going to set the table a little bit. We're going to talk about civic education, and I just want to set some definitions here. So we're going to talk about environmental action civics. If you haven't heard of that before, it is the educational approach that EarthForce uses when we work in partnership with adults and working with young people. And so it involves identifying a local environmental issue, engaging with community members to take action by advocating for system changes to policies or practices. When we're talking about civics today, we're talking about K through 12 civic education. I welcome you to maybe even think about where civics lies with non-formal ed as well. There's a growing number of non-formal educators working on civic ed in other programming as well. And then when we talk about citizen, we are talking about someone who is a member of a community. So this has nothing to do with legal status or citizenship, and everything to do with what it takes to meaningfully participate in community level decision making. And then finally, we are going to implicitly or explicitly talk about agency a lot today. And this is referring to the ability to recognize power and inequity and act towards self-determination. And that is individual plus community. That definition comes from, and some of the things I'll be talking about today comes from a reading or some research, Campano and colleagues from 2020 on agency as collectivity, which we'll link in the show notes. I highly recommend if you want to kind of geek out on the academic and research side of this. So today we're going to do something fun. We're going to sort of do a Q&A. And so I'm going to ask my colleagues questions, and we'll build on answering these together. I'll jump in as well. And we'll wrap up hereafter together. So Vince, I want to ask you a question first. What is missing when students learn how systems work, but never interact with them?
Thanks. That's a great question. I loved your introduction to and the description of all the terms. And so thank you for doing that. I think that's important that we do. But I'm going to go in the Wayback Machine, even before my own memory, and talk a little bit about the founding of the country. And it's our 250th anniversary, after all. And, when you read, I've been with this 250th anniversary, I've been reading Tocqueville again and some stuff from Jefferson and when they wrote about what made Americans unique and how they learned to be a part of the civic system, it was really about hands-on participating in and working in communities to solve the problems that were there. And Jefferson even writes, when he talks about why have a public education, he says so that people can make meaningful decisions in their communities. They need to understand math and engineering and so on and so forth so that they can participate in that decision making. And so if I use that as a base, which I am going to, I think what we lose when we don't do that for young people anymore is we lose that connection, that understanding that you are part of the system that should be making decisions in your community. And you don't just lose that understanding, you lose your understanding of yourself and that your ability to influence that. And so often, like you guys, and probably a lot of people that listen to this, I read research about civic education and how important it is, and how kids aren't able to pass the NAEP test because they can't name all three forms of all three parts of the government. And I think that's really important. But to me, more important is, can they walk down the street, talk to the mayor or the city council about a stormwater problem or a climate resilience problem, or something like that, and actually participate? Do they have the knowledge that makes that possible? And that, I think that's what we're really lacking in a lot of ways in this country now, with all the politicization and everybody taking these strange positions and on various things. But if you get to the community level and you're more likely to have extreme weather or fire issues, you're not worrying about whether or not that fire is politically energized or not, right? The weather has changed. You're going to have more wildfires, and you need to be able to solve that problem in some way, or at least adapt to it. So that's what I think we lose.
That's great. And I think that is what is currently missing, from traditional civics education, is that sort of participation. What you're speaking to as well is when you're looking at systems, you're recognizing power dynamics and inequities. And so rather than just being complacent in a system that maybe, it isn't working for you, you're able to recognize that and take action to shift towards something better, which is exactly, how our country was founded, was recognizing what wasn't working, and folks wanted to find something that was, right?
Yeah. Well, when you're young, we're building the toolkit you have to solve problems. And if we don't give you the tool of civics. You don't have that when you're older. Sorry, Taylor, you were about to jump in and I got excited.
Yeah. So Taylor, what would need to change to shift civic education from an individual rights lesson to more of this system thinking approach that we're talking about?
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think simply it's just adding the opportunity for students to exercise those rights. It's not that we get rid of teaching the lessons, like understanding the content and knowledge of how we organize ourselves or govern ourselves, but then also how do you participate? And then specifically as a young person, because I think when you do engage in these civic spaces, you're like, well, I'm not a registered voter. I'm not an elector, as it were. So my rights are diminished. No, not necessarily. You still have, speech, press, assembly. And then if you have some youth adult partnerships, even petition, depending on how your local community. So it's like understanding the civic mechanisms that you have at your disposal as a young person so that you get those experiences and build those skills so that when you do become, a registered voter, then you can exercise your right to vote with that informed decision making. So then I think it also then comes into, especially with the environmental action civics process, which incorporates a lot of research and data gathering. And so it's kind of a bit of both, where you're making informed decisions based off of inquiry or investigation that you are doing within your community space. So you feel confident to engage in that. So I feel if you lack that understanding of the issue or the understanding of your peers or your neighbors, your ability to engage in the discourse, it might not feel as confident. And so I think those are important. So the change or the shift is just adding opportunities for students to exercise those rights. And so if you're an adult, identifying those mechanisms and helping facilitate them through those experiences would be fantastic.
Yeah. I think what you're naming too is like the opportunity to add to like collective knowledge and understanding, like this larger collective. And this is how knowledge is created, right? It's from collective struggle, dialogue, and shared experience. It's not just individual thinking. So when you're exercising your rights in with the community, you're experiencing that like collective sort of power that you have.
And I think one final bit I would add is, I think in like climate education, like we had this big initiative around content knowledge. Like we need to teach about a thing. And that was great. We did succeed. And it provided even more kind of this anxiety around, well, what can I do about it? So especially when we have these times, which, like, well, what can I do about it? And then, so that's why a lot of things are shifting more down to this action. So like, oh, now that you have all this information, let's put it to work and, engage and make decisions collectively. What were we going to say, Vince?
I loved what you said, SJ, but I wanted to point out something that I thought was really interesting to me anyway, is that you and I have arrived at a very similar point about what's important, but the chance that I would say collective as a description of what we do is so unlikely. So we come from such different political places, kind of political backgrounds, but we've arrived at the same place, which is that the way to have good decision making, the way to solve problems in communities is to have people involved, and engaged, and talking about the things that are there. And I think the examples that Taylor give are great examples of that. But I just wanted to call out that that we start in different political homes. Not that I'm terribly conservative, but I was raised very conservative, and we've just arrived at the same place.
Yes. We need a lot more of that, please. So great. I'm glad we could be a model for that today. Kristen, I want to ask you, we work in this space of environmental education, civic education, science education, STEM, the whole gamut, right? And so tell me more about why civics might not just belong in a social studies classroom.
Yes, of course, civics belongs in a much broader range than just the civics classroom. Vince, as you were talking earlier to your first point about the importance of having a well-rounded education, being strong in math and reading and all of those subjects to be an informed citizen, to then, participate in society. I was thinking too about specifically our work, Earth Force's work, with our network of partner organizations who are in that non-formal space. So not only in a variety of formal subject classrooms, but also in the non-formal space. So we have a whole breadth of partners working in the after-school space, in the summertime space, in the camps and other sorts of areas. And they also work with teachers of all subject areas, so ranging from STEM to arts, literacy, environmental literacy, and things like that. Civics is everywhere. And this question also got me thinking about civics outside of the classroom is also a way of seeing young people not just as students at school, but also as fully fledged community members. Like, our students are also gardeners. They're also volunteers working with their mom, Vince, like you shared. And so we need them just as much as we need all of the engineers and librarians and other folks that make a society function. That young people are not just students at school, but they're also citizens in that way that we defined it earlier, much more broadly than just that.
Hear, hear.
Yeah.
And I think I don't know when we decided that if you're below 18, you can't make decisions or have input on things, but that's a crappy decision whenever we made that one. We should take that one back.
Yeah. We talk about this often, how young people are the most marginalized population, actually, and they don't normally have a voice. And so, right, if we think about civics education as being an opportunity to do that, that should be everywhere. That should be in every type of non-formal and formal education interwoven into our whole school ecosystem, right?
We talk about things like science literacy, environmental literacy, and all of these things, but are you literate if you don't understand how those things, science is a tool, and environmental education or environmental learning is a tool, if you don't understand how those are applied in the world around you, right, and how you can use them? Are you really literate in those things if you don't understand the application and haven't ever experienced them?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I know my answer to that, but I don't think
absolutely,
Vince. You are. So
yeah. Well, and we've moved into defining environmental literacy as having the tools, resources, understanding to take informed action. And so, that it belongs everywhere. That is civics, and that is also environmental literacy, right? So I think we've become more holistic and encompassing when we're talking about literacy and are trying to dig into exactly what you named, because it's been missing. So we're going to wrap up here soon, but I have one more question that we can chat about today. And so this really is a question about visioning and looking forward to the future. So what would it look like if every student that graduated had already participated in an environmental action civics experience, right? So in shaping their community, in participating as a citizen, right? What would that look like?
Well, I will start on that. It would be cool. And
very cool.
But I think we would have much more robust civic infrastructure, human infrastructure in communities, and problems that come to our communities like climate resilience problems and others wouldn't be marginalized, unaddressable kind of things that are made by, decisions that are made by a small technocratic group that think they're the only ones that know. And I think those decisions, because of that, would be so much better, right? They would take into account the problems that so many more people face, rather than just a solution that makes sense to someone that sits at their desk to make that decision. So that's what I think. I think it would, but I also think the world would be our political world would be so much less divisive and so much less. People wouldn't feel like they can't be involved. I think they would think they could.
Yeah, I agree, Vince. I think that would be super cool. And I was also thinking to Vince's point about how I think that would impact positively, the concentration of power that we have in a lot of places in our country. And that, should students growing up know how to actually navigate the systems that exist in our world, I think that would be a lot more equitable.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Honestly, what could not be said? It would be cool, and I agree. Yeah, more civic infrastructure. Yeah, more folks having had discourse and skills and experiences so that they can then engage. And then, yeah, put that like elected voter power to, you know, they're like, oh, now I can create a petition, or now I can go and exercise more of these rights now that I have access to them.
And don't you think, I think it'll also change adults. So often when I talk to people about what we do, they're like, yeah, my kid could never do that. And I'm like, of course your kid could do it. Don't be an idiot. So, but I think it would change adults' understanding of what's possible from young people as well.
Yeah, it'd be a total orientation shift, right? And everyone would have an experience where they have this collective agency already. So they would be walking around recognizing power and inequities and like doing something about it with their community. And so we just wouldn't have, you know, these issues that we're seeing now. So yeah, what a beautiful world. And we're excited to be helping shape that future world with you all. Thank you for listening today. As always, let us know what you think over at earthforce.org/podcast. And don't forget to rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. Thanks for joining. Bye.
Great conversation, y'all. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks. This was fun.